The ground of Europe and Asia still remembers screams from centuries ago. But the truth behind those echoes will shock you because 3 savage moments changed history forever, and few truly understand them. One man rose from nothing, crossed continents, erased cities, and terrified kings, but the real story is darker than legends, darker than movies, and darker than classrooms ever dared to explain. Sources suggest his armies moved faster than rumors, killed without mercy, and punished defiance absolutely, yet the most savage moments came from decisions that felt cold, planned, and terrifyingly deliberate. This is not a fairy tale, not a myth, and not exaggeration, because according to historians, entire regions collapsed after single commands. And those commands reshaped how power, fear, and war still work today. You may think you know this conqueror already, but stay with me because what happened next involves mass terror, psychological warfare, and choices that still disturb experts who study human cruelty. Let me show you exactly how this happened, step by step, moment by moment, without glory, without fantasy, and without hiding the brutal truths behind one of history's most feared empires. Long before crowns and banners, the man later called Genghis Khan was born into chaos, poverty, betrayal, and violence on the harsh Mongolian steppe. As a child, he reportedly watched family members die, clans abandon him, and enemies hunt him, teaching him early that mercy often meant weakness, and survival demanded absolute loyalty or total destruction. By adulthood, he united fractured tribes through fear, reward, and strict law, creating what became the Mongol Empire, a war machine unlike anything the world had seen. This empire was not large at first, but it was fast, disciplined, and brutally efficient, using horse archers, strict commands, and shared purpose to overwhelm much larger, slower enemies. Here's the first surprise most people miss, according to sources. Mongol soldiers were forbidden to steal randomly, fight each other, or disobey orders, because discipline made their cruelty far more effective. Another shock comes from communication, because riders reportedly relayed commands across vast distances in days, not months, letting entire armies move like one body with terrifying precision. And finally, loyalty mattered more than blood, because commanders were chosen by skill, not family, creating resentment among rivals but deadly efficiency on battlefields across Asia and Europe. Now here's where things get really interesting, because these systems allowed moments of savagery that were not chaotic but calculated, intentional, and designed to break resistance completely. The first major revelation begins with cities that refused surrender, because according to historical accounts, defiance triggered punishment meant to be remembered for generations. When a city resisted, Mongol forces reportedly killed nearly everyone, sometimes stacking skulls into towers not for madness, but to send a message louder than any written warning. Imagine hearing that an entire city vanished in days, not slowly, not accidentally, but by command, then realizing your own city stood next on the invasion path. Numbers vary by source, but some historians estimate hundreds of thousands died during single campaigns, a scale of destruction unimaginable to people living peaceful modern lives. This terror strategy worked frighteningly well, because cities often surrendered instantly once they learned what happened to neighbors who resisted even briefly. Think about it like this. Fear traveled faster than armies, doing half the conquering before soldiers even arrived at the gates. Editors can visualize burning cities, silent streets, and survivors fleeing with nothing, spreading stories that weakened enemies without another arrow being fired. But if you think that's crazy, wait until you hear this. Because the second revelation shows savagery used not just against enemies, but entire populations. According to some sources, when cities surrendered, skilled workers were spared, while others were reportedly executed or enslaved, separating families and destroying social structures overnight. This wasn't random cruelty, historians suggest, but economic calculation, because artisans strengthened the empire, while terror ensured obedience among the conquered. Here's a chilling detail. Some armies counted kills to prove obedience, turning death into accounting, discipline, and reward. Compare that to modern workplaces measuring performance, and the parallel feels disturbing because systems, not emotions, drove these actions. Then comes the contrast. While enemies saw monsters, many within the empire saw order, safety, and opportunity, creating loyalty built on fear and reward combined. Experts argue this dual system explains rapid expansion, because people obeyed not from love, but from survival instincts sharpened by examples of extreme punishment. But wait, there's more, because the most savage moment did not involve battlefields, but revenge carried out on a massive, symbolic scale. This brings us closer to the core of the story, where personal betrayal, political insult, and absolute authority collided with devastating consequences. According to multiple historical accounts, a single diplomatic incident reportedly triggered destruction so vast it permanently altered regional populations. Messengers were killed or humiliated, depending on the version, and that act crossed a line that could not be uncrossed under Mongol law. What followed was not rage, but systematic annihilation, because the response was planned, staged, and executed over years with terrifying consistency. Entire regions were invaded, cities erased, and irrigation systems destroyed, ensuring recovery would take generations, if it happened at all. This was punishment designed to echo through time, warning future rulers that disrespecting Mongol authority carried unbearable cost. But the darkest truth is still ahead, because this destruction reshaped global history in ways most people never connect. This devastation reportedly weakened entire civilizations, opening paths for new powers, new trade routes, and unexpected exchanges that connected East and West more tightly than ever before. Here's the twist most people never expect, because while destruction spread, ideas, technology, and disease also traveled, changing economies, warfare, and daily life across continents. The climax revelation is this: the same terror that crushed cities also created stability within borders, allowing merchants to travel safely under Mongol protection. According to historians, trade flourished under strict control, linking China, the Middle East, and Europe through routes that later shaped the modern world. So the system combined extreme violence with enforced order, showing how fear can build empires while quietly planting seeds of long-term change. This reframes everything, because savagery was not chaos, but a tool used to reset power, control movement, and dominate human behavior at scale. So what does all this mean for us today, living in a world shaped by those ancient decisions? First, it reminds us that systems matter more than individuals, because organized rules can magnify both cruelty and progress far beyond personal intentions. Second, it shows how fear spreads faster than force, influencing choices before conflict even begins, something still visible in politics, business, and global relations. Third, it warns that short-term dominance often carries hidden costs, because destruction can echo for centuries in ways leaders never fully control. Here's a small but powerful lesson: information travels faster than weapons, and stories can conquer minds long before armies arrive. Another takeaway is uncomfortable, because people often accept harsh rule if it brings safety, order, and predictable outcomes. This helps explain why some conquered populations reportedly cooperated, even while remembering the terror that forced their obedience. Before we wrap up, there's one final thing you need to know, and it changes how we judge this entire story. Sources suggest many atrocities were exaggerated by enemies, while others were minimized by supporters, leaving historians to piece truth from fragments. So the real horror may not be exact numbers, but the deliberate use of fear as policy, strategy, and legacy. That is the unexpected twist, because the most savage moments were not accidents of war, but choices made with clear purpose. This brings us back to the opening question: why does this still matter now? It matters because modern power still uses similar tools: pressure, fear, narrative control, and selective mercy to shape behavior. When you see headlines today, remember these patterns are old, tested, and frighteningly effective. If this opened your eyes, imagine how many other history stories hide uncomfortable truths beneath heroic legends. That's why understanding the past matters, not to glorify violence, but to recognize warning signs early. If you want more stories that uncover history's darkest, most shocking moments, you already know what to do next. Like this video if it challenged your view, subscribe for deep, cinematic history stories, and share it with someone who loves real history. For a deeper dive, watch the next video on how fear reshaped empires across time, linked right after this. And now tell me in the comments, do you think fear creates stronger control than trust, or does it always collapse eventually? Like, subscribe, share,